Good morning. Welcome back from spring break. Carrie Lynn Paulson. This is enthusiasm for the end of spring break. I appreciate that. It's very impressive. Glad to see you all here and back from break. Thank you for coming out now that the mornings are dark again. A couple of quick announcements, and then I'll introduce Justo González. First of all, we will have a couple of extra events today. At 10 o'clock, if you want to join us for coffee and donuts, we have coffee and donuts at the Tadlock House, which is just across the Oval. And if you can join us for that, please do, and you have a chance to sit and chat a bit with Justo. At 12:15 in the cafeteria, a first for us, we're going to have a Spanish language lunch. Lunch will be at 12:15 in the cafeteria, hosted by Beatrice, and that'll be for anybody who wants to join in and try out their Spanish a bit. At 7 o'clock tonight, there will be another event at Emmanuel Episcopal Church on Cumberland Street, and if you can join us for that, please do. We have two more events this year, just as you're doing your planning. We have the student lecture, Noah Rosenbaum, coming up at the end of this month. And then on April 15th, we're adding an event, which is soprano Andrea Baker. She's going to do a program, an abbreviated form of a program called Sing Sister Sing, which is a history of African American women's voice. She is an opera singer in Europe, but she's going to be here with us on the 15th. Thank you for being here. Any guests, you're very welcome. I'm glad you're here with us today. Thanks to IT and to Ivy and the TAs, as always. It's an honor to end the series with Justo González. For many years here at King, I've taught a church history survey course, usually about once every other year. It's going on right now. And those students in that course read Justo González's Story of Christianity. So they've been aware of him for some time. It's a remarkable book, and it was my first introduction to him as well. It shows a remarkable ability to condense tremendous amounts of scholarship into chapters that are short and readable, yet very scholarly. It's a remarkable, remarkable book. And it has been a classic for many years. The same is true of his 3-volume History of Christian Theology, History of Christian Thought. Accessible and yet scholarly books which have been used in seminaries and universities across the world for decades. I was talking to Dr. Rainwater this morning, who said he encountered this in 1971. So these textbooks have been in use for a long time. Those are 5 books that show a tremendous influence for Dr. González's work, but they are only 5 of over 100 that he has produced in his career. His published work ranges widely from history and theology, biblical commentary, a significant body of work on the Hispanic church, and works on church life, including several co-written with his wife, theologian and historian Catherine González, who is also with us this morning, and please welcome her. Justo's scholarly career began in Cuba, where he grew up. He eventually moved to Yale University and was the youngest person ever to receive the PhD in historical theology from Yale. He did a study of the medieval theologian Bonaventure. He taught at the Evangelical Seminary of Puerto Rico. He taught at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University. And he's also founded the Association for Hispanic Theology, a project which brings together, as he told me, those who are teaching in seminaries and those who are teaching in basements across the world. To finish off a series that was themed Remembrance and Hope, I wanted somebody who could think big. Someone who could think across centuries and try to give us a coherent, synthesized picture of these themes, remembrance and hope. And no one could be better for this than Justo González. He spent a career writing broadly, thinking carefully, and I look forward today to his reflections on remembrance and hope. Please welcome Justo González.
Thank you. I hope you are as enthused when we finish as you are when we begin. Today, as we have been told, there's a luncheon in Spanish for those of you who want to practice so that when you get to heaven you won't need an interpreter. You're welcome to come. There's a book that for generations English-speaking children have been reading. and for the same generations has puzzled adults. And that's more than one book, but it's a whole story of Alice in Wonderland. And I would like to take as my starting place here a well-known exchange that takes place in through the looking glass between the White Queen and Alice. And the White Queen says, there is a great advantage in it that one's memory works both ways. And Alice replies, I am sure mine only works one way. I can't remember things before they happen. And the Queen remarks, it's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards. I'm not sure what Lewis Carroll had in mind when he wrote that story. As a matter of fact, I'm sure that nobody knows. But I take my guess that what he was proposing was a strong yet humorous protest against a modern world that had become all too logical, a world that did not realize how topsy-turvy it really is, a world that does not realize how different it would look from a different perspective. In the world in which Carol lived, a unicorn would have been considered impossible. In the world of Alice, it's a unicorn that looks at her and says he doesn't quite believe that she exists. In the world in which Carol lived, it has become our world. Everything could be explained on the basis of the past. To understand something means to find out what are the events that took place before them and that led to whatever you're studying. So it's a matter of looking at the past. And this was true, obviously, of physical events, such as a billiard ball that hits another billiard ball and it goes into the pocket. It was also true of historical events, which supposedly could be understood purely on the basis of the events that preceded them. And it is against this orderly world, this so sensible world, apparently, that Carol says, that the White Queen says, it's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards. Again, I don't know what Carol had in mind, but as I read those lines, I'm immediately brought to mind this modern world of us and what we mean by causes, what causes things. Actually, I'm going to explain that in a moment later, but when we talk about causes, what we really mean is what the ancients and people throughout ages have called efficient causes. But we forget about something else that people have always spoken in the past, and that is what they call final causes, or if you like big words, teleological causes. If one asks, perhaps you could put it this way, what we call causes today, the efficient causes, are pushing causes. But one can also think of the possibility that there may be other causes, pulling causes, causes that pull things to happen. If you ask why, the most common answer is because. And the because is something that went before. Why does the sun rise every morning? Because the earth rotates. Why, you ask a student, why are you reading this book? Well, because the professor told me I had to read the book. Why did the professor tell you to read the book? Because when the professor read the book, she found it very interesting. Why did she find it very interesting? Oh, because when she was a child, she saw a tree fall. Why did the tree fall? Oh, because that year it rained a whole lot. Why did it rain a whole lot? Well, because there were some currents out in the Pacific that produce this thing that's called El Nino. And you can go back and back and back all the way back to the Big Bang, and you can still ask, why the Big Bang? Now, that's what we understand by causes in common parlance today. But the same question about why are you reading this book can also be answered in the opposite direction. I am reading this book because I want to know what it says. Why do you want to know what it says? Well, because I wish to be a physician someday. Why do you wish to be a physician? Oh, because I want to help people, and so on, and so on, and so on. So a why question can be answered both in terms of because and in terms of so that. Now, obviously, for us, we tend to think that it's only the becauses, the things before that work. But there is also the queen that comes across and says, "Now, just a moment, think in a different way. Think about remembering the future." So that question is a question of remembering forward. When that student is reading that book, because the professor told her to read it so, she is remembering backwards. But when she's reading the same book, because she wants to learn something, or because she wants to be a physician, or because she wants to help people, she is remembering forward. And that remembrance forward is part of what causes her to read the book. And again, in most traditional languages, in traditional language, the first kind, the kind that you always talk about, she reads the book because the professor told her to do so, are called efficient causes. And the other kind of cause, she's reading the book because she wants to do this and that and the other, is what usually called final or teleological causes. Now today we hardly ever speak about final causes. Actually, that's so much the case that if somebody tells you that according to some theologian, God is the final cause of all things, what people think is, well, if you go back and back and back and back far enough, you get to God. When traditional theologians said that, they didn't mean that. They believe that, yes. But they also believe that God is that towards which all things are moving. And so God causes not just by pushing, God causes also by calling, by moving, by pulling. And obviously the reason why, or one reason why, the efficient causes have become so important for us and we've forgotten about the others is because of the success of the physical sciences. Well, the physical sciences basically study efficient causes, and they're important, and they should be studied. Okay? And that is the reason why we are able to do as many things as we're able to do, and that's the reason why I was able to get here, because the plane flies, and that's the reason why I have a phone here, because somebody back there studied the causes of various things, and that's why this is possible. But, you know, the guy who made this phone made it because somebody else before had studied all kinds of technology. But he also made it because he wanted to make some money to feed his family. And both of those becauses are equally important. Huh? Now, obviously, things are not all that simple when it comes to historical events. Because historical events are typically driven by so many different factors that it is very difficult. It's actually impossible to say, no, this is what happens, something to happen. If you ask, why did the Roman Empire fail? Why did it fall? Well, some people say, oh, because all of these barbarians invaded the empire and destroyed everything that was there. Somebody else might say, well, the Roman Empire became big, became great, precisely because you had all these different people coming in with different ideas and changing things all the time. And both are right. Or you could say, well, whatever. The debate in both cases, if you ask about that, the debate is not about whether there are final causes to that event. The debate is basically what are the appropriate efficient causes to think about that. The barbarians did this or that. The barbarians did that or the other. Okay? The Roman Empire failed because people grew comfortable and lazy. The Roman Empire failed because it became too large to manage. The Roman Empire failed because it had succeeded by conquering peoples all around it and exploiting them, and when it reached a level where that could no longer be done, it could no longer keep on growing. The Roman Empire failed because the water systems used lead pipes and people that affected people's minds, And you can give all those explanations, but the point is that all of those, no matter what they are, all of them are basically efficient causes, what happened before. But then in comes the white queen. And in the middle of all of this discussion says, it is a poor sort of memory that only works backwards. With these words, she reminds us that our current fixation on efficient causes is a relatively recent phenomenon. We have, throughout ages, people have thought that things are caused not just because, but also so that. Think about that billiard ball again, falling in the pocket. Now, the way you think about it is the billiard ball falls into the pocket because another billiard ball hit it, and that other billiard ball hit it because it was hit by a cue, and it came with a certain spin and so on because of a certain movement in the arm, and you can go on the way back. But think about the possibility that the billiard ball falls into the pocket because the pocket is calling it. And that another ball hits it because this ball was calling it so that it could go and fulfill its call into the pocket. And you can go all the way back. And both things make exactly the same sense. And my immediate reaction, obviously, when I say that, is to think that it's absurd. Who ever heard of such a thing? Who ever heard about a pocket pulling in a billiard ball into it rather than another ball pushing it? After all, I have been taught that things happen because of efficient causes. But in comes the white queen and messes things up. But it's not just a white queen. Philosophers have also messed it up, in a good sense. Messing up sometimes is good. Okay? Both David Hume and Immanuel Kant called into question the whole notion of causality. Have you ever seen a billiard ball move another? You have seen a billiard ball moving. You have seen the ball stop. You have heard a noise. And you have seen the second ball started to move. But you have never actually seen cause. Cause is something that's in your mind. And it helps you understand events. But really, there's no way that you can prove even efficient causality. Even though that may seem strange to us, the truth is that even though in theory we try to explain things on the basis of a because, in truth, we arrange our lives even in the most minute details so that. A student burns the midnight oil not only because the teacher told her to study this material, but also so that someday she may have fulfilled her dream and become a doctor. When yesterday I left my driveway and turned left, I did not turn left because of where I was coming from. I turned left because of where I was going. When I went to the airport yesterday, I went to the airport so that I could be here this morning. In the morning when I brushed my teeth, yes, because my mother told me to do so, but also because so that my mouth would feel better. Significantly, as I read Scripture, I find at least as many so that's as I find becauses. From God's calling creation into being by the divine word, to Jesus calling some fisher folk to fish in other waters. Things are brought into existence by the word of God that says, let there be. That's just all that. Let there be. In Matthew, first chapter of Matthew, the birth of Jesus is explained by its purpose, so that what was spoken by the prophet may be fulfilled. And later on, in the next chapter, they flee to Egypt so that what the word of the prophet said might be fulfilled. And many, many other examples abound. However, it's interesting that in those examples, the things that take place so that, there's also an antecedent. A past promise that is to be fulfilled. Jesus was born in such a way so that what the prophet said may be fulfilled. So it goes both ways. It is a future that has been announced, but it is not a capricious future, an unforeseeable future, because there is a dialectic between the past promise and the future fulfillment. The past announces the future, and the future calls the past to its fulfillment. The future is promised in the past. And precisely because the future is promised, efficient causes work in order to bring about the announced future, so that, the final cause. It is a poor sort of memory that only works backwards. The White Queen is right. She's part of a chess set. And he will be a very, very poor chess player who can only play on the basis, on the sole basis of the moves that have taken place before. A good chess player has to know what the purpose of the game is, has to have a plan, has to have a place to go. And apparently the queen moves simply, perhaps at random, with the enormous liberty that the queen has in a chess set. The queen also moves because she wants to checkmate the king. It's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards. And let me add, it is also a poor sort of faith that only works from efficient causes while forgetting the promised end. Because faith is grounded on the promises of God. The memory of faith also moves forward, like the Queen's memory. What faith remembers is not only the past that it has experienced, but also the future that has been promised. As people of faith, we are called to live not only out of the past, but also out of the future. Like the Queen lives out of the future of checkmating the king. That is why I have said repeatedly that history is not written solely from the past that someone recorded, but also from the present, where the historian stands, from the future that the historian either fears or hopes for. Church history right today is very different than what I was taught so many, many years ago. He said something about my being the youngest graduate or something. Well, that was many, many years ago. And in that span of time, history has changed. Obviously, the past has not changed, but history has changed. Because history is not just the past. Memory is not just the past, pure and simple. Memory and history are the past as it lives in us today. In my case, a different present and a different view of the future have led me to a different past. I now read the history of the church in a different manner, or as the White Queen would say, from a different memory of the future. Since I spoke about the Roman Empire, let me just give you an example that comes to mind. The greatest historian of the church in ancient times was a man by the name of Eusebius of Caesarea. It is thanks to him that we know many, many things about the early church that otherwise we would not know. He was very close to his bishop, his pastor, who died as a martyr in the year 309. And obviously that was both a devastating and a very inspiring event for Eusebius. A few years later, in 314, Eusebius became the pastor of the church that his friend had pastored before. But the situation was very different. His friend had died as a martyr. His mentor had died as a martyr. Now he was a bishop of a church that had increasing support from the state. And it's interesting, then he uses the same library that his teacher Pamphilus had been using. But what he sees in it is different. Because now he has this vision that from the beginning God had a plan of bringing the empire and the church together. And so he reads all those old materials, seeing in them, trying to see in them how they lead to that union of church and empire. By the way, that's why we have the notion that we often are told that the persecutions were because the empire didn't understand what the church was about. Baloney. If you look at the history, the more the empire learned about the church, the more they persecuted it. But it was Eusebius that because of that vision that they had to come together, began understood, not that he was cheating or lying, he just understood what he was reading as bringing to this present of mind that is pointing to this shining future where the empire will make everything holy. Now, Eusebius didn't like very much a certain book of the New Testament, the book of Revelation. And he didn't like it because John of Patmos, the writer of the book of Revelation, was in a very different situation and had a very different idea of history, of the future of history. And there you find that Rome is the capital of the empire, is actually the great harlot seated on the 7 hills, and the great destructor who's drunk with the blood of the martyrs. And there's an angel that comes and says, wow, the Babylon the Great has fallen. And by Babylon, John means, the empire in which he's living. And obviously, Eusebius doesn't like that. And not only doesn't like it, but has difficulty even understanding it. Because the present in which Eusebius is living is very different from the present in which John was living when he was in exile in Patmos. Now, that should not surprise us. To this day, it also happens. When an election approaches, each party reads history from its own perspective. And you end up with 2 constitutional assemblies and 2 George Washingtons and 2 Abraham Lincolns. And 2 or 3 different reasons why the country became great and 2 or 3 different how to make it great. I'm not saying all this in order to promote skepticism, much less some kind of cynical indifferentism, which I'm afraid is what's beginning to pervade in our political scenes. There's an objective reality that no historian can simply ignore. Perhaps the best example I can think of is a landscape. If anybody tells you that they see the landscape completely and exactly as it is, they are deceiving themselves, or they're lying, or they are God. Nobody sees the landscape exactly as it is. You see a landscape from the perspective where you are. And if you're standing over here, you see some things. If you're standing over there, you see some other things. If you ask some questions, you get some answers. If you ask different questions, you get different answers. If you're interested in colors, you see something different than if you're interested in lights or in textures or in shapes. And it's the same landscape. Now, the landscape is there. The landscape is normative. You cannot, if it's a tropical landscape, you cannot put a polar bear in a Caribbean island. Okay? And you certainly cannot put a coconut palm tree in Alaska. Okay? There's a certain normative character to the landscape. The landscape is there. And the same thing happens when you read history, and the same thing happens when you read Scripture. But that doesn't mean that you can read it without a perspective. Now, how do you improve your reading in that situation? Obviously, part of it is by being able to share perspectives, So if I'm looking at the landscape from here, and I talk to you who are looking at it from over here, I may be able to point out things to you that you had not seen. I'm not putting them there. I'm giving you a richer view of the landscape. And that's true of history too. What's happening, much of what Eusebius said is clearly true. But he needed a little bit of the perspective that John Fabulous would have told him if he had paid a bit more attention to John. Now, what is true of political history of a nation is also true of the history of the church. Almost half a century ago, a historian by the name of Philip Schaff, professor of church history at Union Seminary, wrote these words: "The central current and ultimate aim of universal history is the kingdom of God established by Jesus Christ. This is the grandest and most comprehensive institution in the world, as vast as humanity, as enduring as eternity. All other institutions are made subservient to it, and in its interest the whole world is governed. It is no afterthought of God, no subsequent emendation of the plan of creation, but is the eternal forethought, the controlling idea, the beginning, the middle, and the end of all God's ways and works." Now, from the point of view of the canons of academic endeavor, that is absolutely preposterous. It is as preposterous as a unicorn in Alice's world or Alice in the unicorn's world. A church historian making such claims would never get tenure, would never be hired in that Union Seminary where Schaff taught. To study the history of Christianity, today we have to study it as just a regular, any other social phenomenon. Things happen because other things happened before. We have to find the efficient causes that brought them about. But then you have to say, remember the unicorn. Remember the white queen. Remember backwards. Now, all that seems preposterous, but that is what Christians do every day. When you pray, "Thy kingdom come," what are you doing? You are remembering a future. You are remembering a promise. You are claiming a promise, you are claiming a future, and because you are claiming that, then you are also committing yourself to doing certain things. And that what is true of nations is also true of the church, and is also true of individual people. Why are you here at the school? You're not here only because you're a good student, if you are. You're not here only because you received a scholarship, or because your parents decide that this was a place for you to be and grow up. You're here out of a future. It may be a future you have not even glimpsed yet. But you are here not only because, you're here also so that. And your main task here at this school, and your main task as human beings, is to remember that future, to seek that future, and once you find it, to remember it. And if you have difficulty envisioning that, remember that it is a very poor memory that works only in one direction. Remember the future. Thank you.
Thank you again for being here. If you're interested in joining Justo for some more chat, we'll be at the Tadlock House for coffee and donuts, Spanish lunch at 12:15, and again tonight at 7 o'clock. Thank you.